Okay. So preparing. Okay, we'll start now.
Live on Facebook.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah. So welcome back to everyone to our parenting talk series. So today we'll be covering a very interesting topic, which is unleash your potential, unleash your child's potential. So basically, this is like we have a lot of last time when we were, especially with during our young generation, we always have like this force or like what do we call? Parents who keep asking us to pursue something like focusing on the STEM, doing sciences, doing math or something related to science, doing medical especially, right? So right now we can see some trends that are moving towards arts, doing on the social studies and stuff. So what actually we want to share something today from our speakers. We want to see if what actually that we as parents that we should have been doing to help our child to really unleash their potential and become a better person when they grow bigger. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to invite our speakers, Puan Jamila and Amal Fatri, to share some of their thoughts.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
To all to the moderator, Puan Nazira, and also to the rest of us who are here in Malaysia. Selamat pagi, and of course you are all also starting to have your break. So good evening to America. So inshallah, what I wanted to do is to share our thoughts and experience in terms of raising our children. And many of us, when we were young, we had our own personal ambition. If you recall back, when you are in your primary schools, you would normally have that thoughts and idea of how you are going to be or achieve what kind of ambition you want to be. And the interesting bit, it keeps changing. It keeps changing every year. And it's also based on you meeting with someone. When you got sick, you want to be a doctor. When you got caught by the police, then you want to become a policeman, or you saw a bomber with the fire fighting and all those things, especially for boys. So that shows that there is something in us, all of us, especially when we are being children, that caught our attention in terms of what we want to be, what we want to achieve. So this is where, instead of just now waiting for the teachers asking us now, we are being proactive as parents. So by virtue that both Jamila and I have 6 children and 6 grandchildren, I think inshallah the whole idea is that we would be able to share some points and some tips on how we can discuss this subject then. So let me now give you, I wanted to make sure. Okay, can you see my slides? Say yes.
Yes, it's clear.
Okay, so I think for some of you, when we had our earlier discussion on this successful parenting leadership model, starting, and for those who did not, it's just to tell that we wanted to make sure that there is certain steps and progress, starting from strong foundation, followed by us giving their physical sustenance, and then subsequently now fulfilling their human needs in terms of both, in terms of the various dimensions, spiritual and that sort of thing. So now we are being proactive to be developing their personal aspiration, which is level 4, before our desire to fulfill as what the Quran, as what insyaAllah we want them to be, becoming the Khalifah, the leader that will impact the Ummah. So at the number 4 is where it's coming from. So rightly when the moderator mentioned about our focus was a technical environment those days. And there was a reason why Malaysia as a nation wanted more engineers, wanted more accountant in the technical line, because it's a nation building, and we just had our Merdeka last week. And upon reflection, the world has moved forward, the world has progressed. So when we look into this subject, and now knowing that there is a lot of interplay, the world has a lot of changes. The children expectation has also changed. And at the same time, in the work field, 100 years ago, some jobs now cease to exist, whereas it's unthinkable that there are new jobs that's coming up beyond our comprehension. So I think this is where we are at the point to ask ourselves, how can we better equip our children? I think that's the key point. But in equipping them, there is a need to find what is it that keeps them going, and how do we unlock them? Because the danger that we want to avoid now, and I think it is a real thing, that parents, by virtue of they are at the upper hand, they decide the agenda of the children, knowing very well that they are not going to take that burden. And I'm saying this because we have seen cases of parent wanting children wanting to become doctor, and the children is doing that out of respect. They know they can do it academically, but their heart is not there, and they wasted their 6 years, and then finally they left that career and moved to something else. So this is it may happen, but if we can avoid it, that will be much better. So what is this STEM, STEAM, STREAM, and E-STREAM that we are talking about? So rightly so, we all know the STEM, and we all being exposed. So somewhere in other parts of the world, then they decided that we have to recognize those who are taking so-called the art subject. And because not everyone are born to have all those mathematical acumen, you know, but there's one thing that they have in common, which I'll share with everyone. So the art side, which it's, and when we talk about art, the problem about us is that we thought it was all about drawing and coloring arts. I mean, it's more than that. This is where legal, lawyer, this is probably human resource. This is also on the industry that talks about human capital in terms of sports and that sort of thing. So I think we certainly need to widen our scope. And in fact, the thing is, a lot of people are still looking high up on STEM type of result, qualification, but not on the other qualification. And imagine now our children wanting to become a YouTuber and programmer, and coding and that kind of things, which I still think that is still part of science then. Now, I believe that somewhere in, if I'm not mistaken, in Korea, then people will start to ask about, there must be more than just art. So there is a need to expand from that STEM to STEAM to now STREAM to include religious aspect. So this is where ethics come into the picture. And I think it's very important that we understand that a lot of our generation also goes through this pathway, you know, whether going to the tahfiz, whether going to the Quranic and to the Islamic studies or whatever religious studies, perbandingan dan sebagainya. So I think the R comes into the picture. So that's where it sort of evolved now from STEM to STEAM to STREAM now. And a lot of us would say that, can we secure a job? And this is where I think we just have to be prepared, in the world out there certainly needs to be mindful that if thing doesn't work, what is your backup? What is it that the children can do even without waiting? And this is where in the story of Muhammad Yunus, the Nobel Prize winner for the microcredit Grameen Bank, mentioned that how the mothers of these people, the single mothers who borrowed their money from the bank, are able to pay back at a very high rate of return, basically. But when they sponsored the children, the graduates who are graduated from this poor family, and when upon graduation, the children says that, hey, where are the jobs? Because they were not able to get jobs because everything that they thought it would be guaranteed for them. So when they decided to migrate back to the city, then Muhammad Yunus believed that this is not the right decision, because no point to flood the city and increase employment. In his book on zero unemployment, he said that your mother have not graduated from any university and yet they were able to produce. So that's where entrepreneurship comes into the picture. So what he did with these graduates, he asked them to group up and form up a little company and provide services, and then they will do everything, provide the financial support in the whole premise that they will be independent 5 years down the road because of their entrepreneurship skill. So this is the whole range from STEM to STEAM to STREAM to E-STREAM, so that it widen our path and dimension then. So what is it that's common for the children as they were growing up? And there is something that you and I have seen amongst our children. It's the level of curiosity. This is where I think their own nature semula jadi that they have been made curious, and I can imagine that many of you even exasperated with all sorts of questions that they ask. And be mindful that, you know, at least for those who are 4.5, which is what the research says, that these are the ones who have the highest level of all sorts of questions, you know, what God is doing, why is God not saving babies from being killed? And these are the kind of curiosity that help us to propel them to the right direction. And I know very well, as compared to my generation and your generation, and this is my and our experience with our grandchildren, I mean, they have the capability of the digital knowledge to be exposed. And I feel that you need to leverage it. Many of you are doing that for that matter. But I just don't want you to restrict it only on the world of computer. Okay? Because my personal view is that very strongly that all the children, bila dia orang dilahirkan, keadaan dia tak sama. They are not the same. And that's why we have now stopped to make that comparison between any of them, because we believe that each and every one of them have their unique talent, unique skills, and certainly we are there to help and nurture. So you will now at this early stage, from what we have experienced is to discover what they really enjoy, what they really like, and then to not only restrict to what they enjoy, but maybe open up themselves to other areas. So, as I said earlier, going through the internet and the YouTube, and that could be a good theoretical understanding, providing definition. But I think more importantly is for them to be taken out and discover of what exactly opportunities available. I still remember that I will always have the children in their extracurricular activities to try out different areas. We had the children did horse riding. And then one day, one of them came and said, I like to try photography. And yeah, we said, okay, we can. Not too costly, basically, but it's just an awareness. And then we also felt that in one particular case, our son decided to go for archery. And I think that what we could see is his ability to focus, his ability to hone his skills on concentrating whenever he wanted to complete his task. And I think that's something which also noticeable by other of his siblings when they ask him, can you describe who I am? He says that, yeah, you are the type who has been very focused in trying to get you to do things. And you will, and again, we know that they will change, but it's also dependent on some of the other aspects, where you bring them. So for us, bringing them to the library, bringing them to the science center and planetarium, bringing them to museum, nature with aquarium, bringing them to places of interest. We have not brought them to any of the theme park, by the way, because I think we wanted to send a message to the children that this is something for you to acquire. And I think if they continue to discover there are different things. I still remember when we went to, we did a visit to New Zealand in Auckland. There is a place called Tipapa, 6 stories high, where children allowed to discover. And in one of the floor, it's about paleontologists. It's about how to discover dinosaur. So if they have been watching Jurassic Park and if they have been watching all sorts of these animals, so that is really a hands-on, holding the brush and then, trying to discover what's the kind of animal or dinosaur extinct. And so you then be able to complement with other aspects, either through YouTube, either through book reading, and through the research. So there's one thing that I wanted to highlight when our experience in Finland, when we visited the future school. Now, they are not teacher-centric, but more student-centric based. So what I meant is that, so when we met Ustaz Hasrizal, and he was telling us the story of his son who was at the age standard 2 or standard 3. So he's about 8, 9 years old. So when they had to learn about the human body, so instead of the teacher telling what the subject that there's learning or the organ and that sort of things, they ask the student, what do you want to learn? So in this case, this boy wanted to learn about the mechanism of breathing. So, and he wanted to know how the diaphragm works. So there is an 18-step checklist in that school, for that matter, of what the student can do. Like framing the question. So it's, for some of you in the university, it's called the problem-based learning, PBL. So the professor, the lecturer just gave you a topic and then you go ahead and find as much as information, gather and make sense out of it. But for the students, using a guided approach that includes certain milestone, certain website that they have to visit, Encyclopedia Britannica, then further down, checklist that they need to meet back with the teacher, or they have to discuss with their friends and share with their friends on their finding. And then towards the end, the penultimate checklist item is that they have to share it to the teacher before the last task for them to share with their friends in the class by speaking out about the subject that they have researched. So you could see that from an uncoordinated, just send them, more coordination, more opportunity, because why? We need to equip our youngsters, we need to equip them on in terms of how best they could maximize and leverage the resources that they have. You are one of the resources as parents. The school is another resource, and obviously the digital era allows them to have another resource, but our advice is for them to be guided. But there is one thing before I pass then to Jamila on my thoughts about this. One, I wanted to mention that, as I mentioned earlier, each children is on a different phase. So and we thought that indeed not everyone can blossom at the same time. So some of them blossom at a different stage of their age. So just like flower, some maybe in the morning, some in the afternoon, or some at the evening or middle of the night. So our children may not blossom equally like their other siblings. So be mindful with that. And one of the track or trail that we need to be mindful is that when they encounter with disappointment, failure. So most of us as parents, we have been an achiever, for instance, and we expect the same thing for our children. So, and that is one thing that many of us might have been doing is that we thrive and we celebrate success and achievement, but sometimes you are not able to manage failures, coping with disappointment, which is something real in life. So as parents, your job is being a role model yourself, being able to give them the support, giving them the hope that managing this failure is something that it is to make you wiser and to see different opportunity. I think the whole idea is that, and I always say to my children that, kalau you nak pandai, God would have sent someone to operate your brain and give you a very intelligent brain. But instead of doing that, God give you a problem to solve. And in solving the problem, you acquire intelligence. So maybe lah, dalam nak acquire that intelligence tu, you go through the path, and some of you may got the answer once, right? Some may have to do repeatedly. Some may have to, do it again and again, but maybe in a different manner. So I sincerely felt that, and you can ask me question during the after question and answer, because this is just to open you up. This is just given an opportunity for you to now start thinking beyond the normal way of how to unlock your child's potential. Then with that, I'll hand over to Jamila for her to then be able to share some of her thoughts in terms of further unlocking your children. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Haji Ahmad Fakri. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for spending your time with us. This is very early in Malaysia, almost 8 a.m. right? So I want to begin by sharing with you this idea. Maybe you have heard of this idea, maybe you haven't. And this is quite a negative, challenging view of seeing the world. It's called VUCA. Now, VUCA, one interpretation of it stands for, it's an acronym. Yeah, it's an acronym. V stands for volatile, U stands for uncertain, and C is complex, and A is ambiguous. So you can see why I call this VUCA negative. It means that the world, especially in the world where we are raising our children, is very, very challenging. It's tough. It's so unpredictable, and God knows, only Allah knows what's in store of in front of our children. Okay, and to an extent, whether you believe this is true or not, there is some truth in it. We just see the recent COVID-19, and we are still in it. Actually, we are still waiting for an antidote to COVID-19. But because of this sudden happening, people have lost their jobs. Face-to-face training, for instance, if you are really dependent on face-to-face training, you have to quickly adapt to online training. Classes, teachers losing their jobs, wedding planners. Back here in Malaysia, actually a lot of wedding planners have lost their businesses. Okay, so there you go. That's the reality of life. So the question now is, if we even accept that this is true, that the world in front of our children, waiting for our children is very, very tough, what can we do? So I would like to offer you a positive way of seeing the world, which is another definition for VUCA. So that is V for vision, U for understanding, and C for collaborative, and A for agile. Okay, so V, having a vision. I repeat, that means how do we raise our children who have a positive vision of the world, who believe in themselves. U, understanding, with an understanding of themselves as well as the world out there. How can they be a positive influence to the people around themselves? How can they be able to lead themselves, be confident leaders to lead themselves as well as others? And C is collaborative, to collaborate with other people. A is agile, adaptive, being adaptive. So when we raise our children, we have to focus on these 4 attitudes, behaviors to empower them, right? Now, I want to tell you a story about one of the countries that me and my husband have visited. And this is one of my favorite countries for some reasons. I've got good friends there. The other reason is what they have overcome. Netherlands is a very small country, actually. It's a very small country, and yet it is one of the most developed in the world. If you eat potatoes, if you eat onions, there's a good chance that the potatoes and the onions that you eat and you serve your children are actually produced and grown in Netherlands, right? So it's a small country, but it's also feeding the world. When I was there, not too long ago, right? That was in, about less than 2 years ago. It's amazing what they have done to the country despite the problems that they are facing. This is something, the background, the setting, we need to understand that it's not, Netherlands is not a country without its own set of problems. It's a small country, it's below sea level. And if a country is below sea level, we understand that it's a serious problem because of air masuk into the country, the water problems. They have been flooded so many times, and every time those floods occur, they lost a large amount of farm animals, which is their livelihood. And not only that, family members, because of the low-lying areas. And yet, the Dutch people, they are very hardy, they're very adaptable. Of course, they mourn the dead, they grieve over it, but they always ask themselves, what can we do about it? So they develop structures, they build structures around the country so that, it protects the country, the small country, from water around it. So not only that, I also discovered that over there they have what we call precision farming. They call it precision farming. It means that there's a different way of farming, of producing, of growing food, in the sense where, if you are a farmer, you are sitting on top of a tractor with an iPad in front of you, just one person, and in front of you is this huge farm, and yet you can tell exactly for every seedling, for every plant that you are planting, how much water is needed, how much fertilizer is needed. With precision. That's why it's called precision farming. So the technology is so advanced that with this precision farming, the farmers need much less water, much less fertilizers to produce the same amount of crops. Yeah? So tengok macam mana we see how the thinking, how they're able to adapt to challenging situations to produce a huge amount of food with less energy, with less number of people. So of course you can Google after this what happens in precision farming, and I believe it's it's something that is being sought after these days, because we know that the shortage of food supply is one of the most pressing problems in the world, right? And that is just the onions and the potatoes. Not only that, they also farm flowers. If you have heard of Keukenhof, Keukenhof is one of the festivals, the flower festivals. But when you look at the history, actually the flowers, especially tulips, which Holland, Netherlands is famous for, it did not originate in that country. Actually, it was exported. Yeah, exported. It was imported. It was brought in from another country. But instead of this particular beautiful flower tulip being developed to become a business that brings profits to the original country, in Netherlands, they developed it to become a big business. And that's one of the secrets why they are so rich today, of a developed country, right? So we can see how sometimes when we want to raise children who are very, very successful in future, sometimes we need to understand that the traditional way might not be the correct way. We are always stretching ourselves and teaching our children to challenge themselves. Is this the best way to do things? Always in the challenging mode, challenging in a respectful way. Because I believe that is the only way that we can raise children who are brave, who are courageous, to think not just about themselves, as well as what benefit they can bring to their family, to their parents, to their siblings, as well as within the communities where they live, right? And coming to that, I must say that when you look at that, then in terms of food production, look at agriculture. In Malaysia, agriculture is not seen as something that is wow. It's not seen as a glamorous job. And this is very unfortunate, because agriculture, food is such a basic necessity for us. And yet we are not doing much to advance ourselves in terms of food production. It's one of the greatest problems actually in humanity, how to produce food. Yeah. So maybe this is an area when we talk about STEAM, STEM, e-stream and such, maybe this is an area that we want our children to be interested in and to develop their skills as well as interest, right? So I would like to just offer some tips how to raise children who are, like I mentioned just now, having a vision, having an understanding of the world they will be stepping into, having the skills to be collaborative with their friends, with their colleagues, as well as having the courage, having the ability to adapt. First of all, as parents, we are the role model. We are the role models for our children. If we show to our children that we are very rigid in our thinking, then that's not going to help them much, right? So be flexible in our thinking. When things change, for instance, when things don't work out according to how we want them, do not panic. Don't panic. Just relax, stay calm, and show to our children that despite the changing times, despite changing circumstances, Allah has given us the ability. We are made for it to overcome that challenge that is thrown into our path. Yeah. jadi orang yang tenang dan very rational instead of panicking and getting upset and throwing bad words. Your children see that, oh, Umi dengan ayah, Umi dengan Abi, Umi dengan Walid, okay je, Mama dengan Abah, okay je. If they can do it, so can I, because you are the number one role model to your children. Remember that. Secondly is to change routines. Sometimes it's good to change routines. I know that it's good to have structure in the house, what to makan, what to buat homework and this and that, right? But sometimes it's good to have some changes, and children will notice that despite the changes, you're okay. We are still, you know, a functioning family. Even going to school itself, maybe you want to take different routes, for instance, and not sticking to the same route. And when we do this, sometimes it might spark a conversation, especially for older children. Why are we taking a different route? And then you can start talking about doing things differently. You know, you can expand, you can stretch the conversation to something that they can reflect within themselves about life itself. It doesn't have to be a very, very short conversation, depending on how much time you have, right? This is especially for younger children, because the ability to be adaptive, to be adaptable, to be agile, especially in the mind, this is something that is never too early to introduce to our children. Imaginative play. I'm sure a lot of you parents out there have already done it, right? And we all know children, you buy them gifts and toys, sometimes they are more interested in the packaging, yeah, in the plastic. And toilet roll, don't throw it away. Toilet roll can become what? It can become a stethoscope, telescope. It can be a telescope, it can be a rolling pin. Do not, you know, brush them aside. When children say, Mama, this is such and such, this is their imagination. This is how they problem solve. This is how they are able to challenge their thinking. You know, this is not going to be used just for this. Maybe kita sebagai parents, kita tak boleh terfikir benda tu, but our children whose minds, whose brains are much younger, they can think of a lot of things, all right? So encourage imaginative play. That's how they think about solutions and thinking beyond the box. Again and again, be aware that Allah has made us, has gifted us the ability to be creative, to be imaginative, to solve problems, even in this current situation when things are difficult for a lot of people. And number 4 is to be collaborative. This is something, if you have a single child at home, we need to create the environment where the child is able to collaborate with others. It's so important, because we know that there is no such thing as success all by yourself. Look at the successes that have been achieved throughout history. Mesti ada teamwork punya. There will be some kind of help from other people. That's how humans function. We succeed when we work together. But we know that every human being is unique. And when we want to achieve an objective, we want to achieve some goals, we have to work with teammates, we have to work with siblings who might have different ideas, who might not share the vision or the initial thought that we have. So what do? We have to sit down, we have to discuss, we have to rise above potential conflict. So kalau daripada kecil lagi, from small, they are used to getting comfortable with dealing with teamwork, then our children are much, much more equipped with the skills on how to be collaborative and succeed in future, right? So like I've mentioned, and Uncle Fakri pun mentioned, kena be open-minded on the careers too. We as parents, we need to keep tabs on what's happening around the world, what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, future challenges. And we know they are going to live in a world that is so different from ours, right? And when your children show some signs of adaptability, being adaptable, being imaginative, acknowledge them for it. Yeah, acknowledge them, to encourage. Very important, especially for young children. They like it when their work gets noticed, you know. Tapi of course lah, puji tu janganlah terlalu puji sangat. Just acknowledge that's a nice way of stacking up the cubes, for instance. How do you think this might work and such, yeah? And equally important, not to say equally important, I feel that this is the most important thing as children grow older, to build their relationship with the creator. Very, very important. The attitudes that they have towards changing environment, changing circumstances, challenges, when things don't work their way, you know, because the attitude of not giving up, of belief that Allah knows what's in front of you, or what's behind you, what's above you. Allah knows everything and He will help you. You just have got to put in your best effort. And things are not bleak. Hope is there. And inshallah, you just have got to put in your best effort, and Allah will send helpers to your path, inshallah. All right, so with that, I shall pass on to Nazira.
Okay, thank you so much for a very short but very full insights and tips on guiding our children to really make them explore and find their own potential, their own interests for their own benefit, inshallah. So we'll go to a Q&A session for now. So we have a question here, one question now here from Brother Munir, I guess. To what extent can we let them go lead their own way?
Okay. This is a question of letting go. Okay. The end game is we have to let them go. That's the end game. And typically that one, we as parents are quite confident that we have equipped them with the necessary skills, capabilities, and all the possible resources for them to stand on their own. So the end game is to let them go. And we knew ourselves that it is not when a bird sits onto the tree, on top of the tree, it is not the branch that is holding the bird, but it is the wings that was able to make the bird fly and soar high. So it is how we have equipped them. So it's a question of from now at a young age and progressively as they grow matured into young adolescents and from toddlers to teenagers and moving on beyond that. So again, it also dependent on the activity that you want them to do. So certain activities that is not dangerous, I think it's very logical. I like to see, and in my case, especially when I have 5 boys, you have given them some element of opportunity for them to develop themselves, but there is a lot of underlying factor which is called the trust. You need to establish that trust. So I still remember when I wanted them, as soon as they reach like 17, 18 years old, they need to learn how to drive the car. So I brought them to a big field and I let them, you know, okay, they use the manual car and they start to drive, and I know it's very, very painful because they were not sure between the clutch and the brake and the accelerator and that sort of things. But that's the way, because you can't be holding them. You know, you can't be they need to discover that, you know, they need to understand the whole process. So the metaphor is that it's just like as your children grows older and older, in the past you would be sitting on a boat rowing with them, but as they progress, as they have learned the ropes and the skills, you now have to let go and let them ride the boat, knowing that there are big boulders, there are big stones, and they will hit and you are there whenever they need support from you. So it's also the ability for the child in terms of maturity. Sometimes, and this is also good, because when they explore, when they do things beyond, they make their discovery, which we were not able to discover then. And I think that is the interaction. So I mentioned the level of trust. I think there's also a parameter that we need to define with the children. And again, when we grow up in our schools and in our education, we were not taught about maqasid syara'i, the 5 elements in the Islamic jurisprudence about what exactly we are trying to do, saving lives, the higher objectives, equal. So I think the way I see it is that when we have defined that parameters and provide them with the boundaries, that this is not going to harm you, this is not going to harm other people, this is not against the Allah's even kita nak ajar dia orang, kalau kita tengok semut, some people, youngsters, they go and pee at the semut punya rumah and that sort of things. And that's where our teaching point, the teaching point of view, teaching moment, that we will be able to tell the children about why we are not allowed, because even such situation happened when Nabi Sulaiman and the army was passing through the ant colony. So I think a lot of teaching moments and this teaching point of view is relevant for the children to develop that. Is there anything you want to add? Yeah, okay, I hope, Muni.
In what ways can we rekindle listener is not able to be a scholar?
Okay.
I'll
read the question. So for the Facebook viewers, so there's another question: in what ways can we rekindle the learning culture of the Islamic scholars of the past? For example, Ibn Sina is not only known to be a scholar in one discipline, instead of many and various ones too. I thought this learning culture is somewhat lost as we aim to be a scholar of one and only one.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think, firstly, I think there is no right or wrong answer if you want to be focused and expert in one area, or you want to diversify and include other areas which is relevant. And I know for a fact that, for instance, in Australia, there are universities offering you undergraduate, and then even the discipline is a combined discipline, like mechanical and medical, legal and engineering, because all these disciplines now are interrelated. And true enough, Finland is trying to experiment about not teaching children based on one subject. They did not, we were taught like, physics, chemistry, biology, all in one stream. But they are trying to combine and integrate the knowledge so that children learn the entire spectrum of knowledge through activities. So for instance, if you do cooking, baking a cake, for instance, in there you can include mathematics, you can include chemistry. Obviously, you can put history inside there as a backdrop, temperature, pressure, physics. So the whole almost and then you can put finance, economy, how much does it cost to buy this? And so when you think about it, and this is where we encourage parents to become the knowledge integrator. So if you remember, once I was talking about how you use the Quranic theme to look at the different aspects of the theme in the Quran and see how those knowledge can be integrated horizontally instead of vertically. So the idea is that to expose the children in a holistic on there are different aspects and subjects. So when you talk about can we or not, I think we can encourage, but we also need to understand that the limits and the ability of our children. So manage that expectation. There are some obviously good gifted children who are able to cope with different things, and their understanding is just like one snapshot they were able to understand, but not many children can do that. So you need to be mindful about your children's intellectual capacity to acquire anything. Then maybe Jamila wants to add on that subject.
Yeah, I feel that it's, I totally agree with Uncle Fakri just now that we have to be mindful that our children are different. They are not all the same. Some kids, they have better capacity and potential in certain areas. Some are better in some other areas. So Allah jadikan kita ni lain-lain supaya kita complement each other. And we need to acknowledge that the children are different. Of course, there are certain basic things, basic knowledge and basic behavior that they have to comply. Things like solat and, understanding why we need to solat semua tu. But having said that, it's very important for them to understand why they are doing such things, why they need to do those things. That's one of the missing experience that a lot of us growing up, even though we attended the religious schools, we are just so lost in the fiqh part and not understanding why we have to do those things, to the extent that we feel that it's a burden to do those things. And this is one of the unfortunate things that's happening to a lot of children these days. The other question by another questioner here, are there different things we need to teach boys and girls? I would say there are certain things that both boys and girls have got to learn. There are survival skills. There are survival skills that includes taking care of themselves, cooking, self-defense. Everybody needs this. Although in the past it's true that girls expected boys to defend them and things like that, but we know that that may not be possible. What if we do not have brothers? What if we don't have men around you? And women are expected to be more independent these days. I would say skills, basic skills like cooking, cleaning, studying, even self-defense. Both boys and girls, they should be equipped. I do not think that these things like self-defense, it should be for boys only. Girls have to be able to defend themselves, just like boys do. Even sports is something that is so important. It's physical health. And when you grow older, you realize that sports is actually very, very important, because that's part of the physical, and it has an impact on your mind, on your brain, because if you're physically active, your brain works better. And when your brain works better, you are able to give more. You become happier. It's your well-being, right? So it's back to the basic needs as a human being.
No, I believe that, we should not try to pigeonhole boys and girls activities. There's certain uniqueness between boys and girls. Definitely, Allah has created khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa unsa to understand that there are differences. Okay, but there are, as far as the culture, dia kata kena feminine base, berlemah lembut and all these things, and where boys kena tough and rough, and therefore they need to do that. I think we need to be very mindful when we start to assign what are the things to do. Skills which allow them to be independent, like I said just now, is such an important thing. I remember when I was in Fresno, budak-budak laki-laki nak belajar masak, dia perginya kata ambil beras, dia tak tahu air. So how do you masak nasi without water, and just by putting on top of a stove on the fire? So again and again, to me, they need to survive, then they know how to cook, not relying. So I think as parents, giving them, and don't think of cooking as just about a matter of cooking. Think about it as a great opportunity. I'm a great believer that our great parents dulu tu very creative. They are the scientists, because they orang campur tepung, campur pisang yang keledek and all those things. They can make all sorts of food. So itu kalau from a chemist punya perspective, it's a concoction of different things to come up with a different product, pakai compound lah, pakai apa lah. So I think our children now has that opportunity, and there is nothing derogatory about someone, a man, knowing how to cook, because the best chef in this world pun, you can see that most of them are men. And the fact that, you know, there are certain skills, and I'm not denying that there are certain women who are very capable, car mechanics who can repair cars because certain innate skills that they have. So there is the element of gender punya preferences. There is also a preferences at individual level. So as long as they are within that boundary, they jaga adab, they jaga susila, they jaga all the Islamic aspect, and I think we need to be able to allow them to practice that. So I'm okay. I'm okay with. I mean, especially now, I want boys not only to learn to cook, but at least, you know, enter the kitchen, because I know in some culture you can be killed by just a man going to the kitchen because there's so many ladies inside there. Which I think if you just bring the things outside the kitchen, like potong bawang and all those simple things, so make it like a family project. Make it that this is a teamwork effort. And cooking is just one of the family project that allows and foster teamwork. So we don't have to. And then the next time is kita basuh kereta pula, girls pula join, and then obviously there's a certain activity of planning, sequencing, assigning tasks. So project work now start to come in when it comes to washing the car, and then you can include jangan membazir air, you can include, you know, let's do it shorter time, and let's divide our responsibility and tasks inside and outside. So again and again, we as parents stepping back with the level of maturity of our children. This is where we download the apps of being human being. We are the one who are having that upper hand, and Allah has amanahkan kepada kita. So I felt that the more we try to segregate this responsibility, as they grow up, boys will become alien going to the kitchen as much as girls will be alien trying to do something outside the house then. Okay? I think we are almost time there. Any more questions, Azira?
Just one last question. One last question. So until what level that we like actually guide them to find their own potential, or do we just let them go through the discovery phase until they find it, until they grow older, or until what level?
You see, if we have built the rapport and trust with our children, we will 99% I would say they will come back to us for guidance. And that's what we as parents do. The older they are, we are there to guide them. It's not like 100% go and do whatever you want. No. But if you are very close to your children to the extent where they feel free and safe to ask questions, to be guided, they are comfortable with you. So you will always be their reference point. So it's not like we force them to listen to us. It's rather they look up to you as role models, as parents, whom they feel very comfortable to ask questions. So that's how the relationship actually will lead the kind of decisions that they will make. And there will be times when we just say, we just don't know, because we came from a different era. You know, this is something that I can share with you my experience. I can share how things were back then, but you have to make your own decision. You have to own this decision. I can tell you what I think, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. You have to make that decision. And sometimes you may make mistakes as you make that decision. You may not get the outcomes that you want, but that's okay. That's how life is. As long as you have done the research, you know, you make an informed decision, it's all right. It's just another milestone in the journey of life. You need to move on.
Well, put it this way lah. If children have access to Google, do they have access to their parent or not? is their parents the first line of defense or the last line of defense when it comes to something that they want to know more? I think that's one of the fundamentals that we need to do, because as I see it and as we have experienced now, the children undergoes different experience and different challenges in their life, from as basic as how to survive, and then how to mediate complicated issues and matters as they grow older. So I still, I know that my children ada yang dah graduate, ada yang dah kerja. I mean, basic question, macam mana nak bayar tax, macam mana nak deal dengan in-laws ke, macam mana nak deal dengan certain kind of relationship. So the question is different now. The issues are much more complex as compared to when they are young. So you need to be prepared to be there, at least to lend your ears. Budak-budak, sometimes our children, they may have already had their idea, or they may have already the thoughts with their friends and colleagues, but your views are considered to be, yes, the Dobby mark, the stamp, the confirmation. Okay, Umi dan Ayah dah kata macam tu. You and I know, and for sure, that we know that we have had to drill to them as they're growing, but it will only happen when they grow up and say, this is the word to confirm that you have done your job, parents. I still remember when my mom said like this, or when my dad said like this. And you may have said it again and again, over and over, to really put a mark on the children's mind and heart. So you need to continue to put that fundamentals. You need to be able to ensure that they know the criterion, between yang hak dengan yang batil. You need to provide them with the right perspective of what Islam wants in that maqasid syar'i again. And I think at the end of the day, the end game is that whatever they do is again benefiting them, benefiting for the ummah, and that's where we believe that they have been moving in the direction to become a good leader for Islam and for the community. Then, so inshallah, we make dua for all of you, as we know that most of your children are still growing up and coming. If everybody has children as good as Imam Shafi'i or Imam Nawawi, then we also don't know how the parents of those ulama face. But before they turn to ulama, they have gone through, and certainly there are many of the ahli-ahli ibadat yang was a perompak, and Allah turned their life in a different pathway. So for us also, we have a great opportunity to raise our children as part of our investment in the dunia and akhirah. And insyaAllah yang baik datang daripada Allah, yang buruk itu adalah semestinya kelemahan kami yang perlu dibaiki. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for our speaker, Puan Jamila and Tuan Haji Ahmad Fakri. Is very really good tips. So insyaAllah, we'll be let's try to strive our best. Oh, you want to join? Okay. All right. So let's strive our the best for our child. Inshallah, let them explore their own potentials, and we'll be the best to guide them. Inshallah. Okay, so to end this, we'd like to say thank you again for the speakers and to the participants. So inshallah, we'll see you again. Inshallah, look forward to other Facebook, our Facebook in MSG. So inshallah, assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Bye. Bye.